today I am coming with some new techniques that I want to share with you after my manifestation summit out in Miami. With that being said, this episode is going to be geared around practicing what you're preaching about. What's going on, guys? Welcome to our podcast, Walking Manifestator. I am your host, Alexa Peña, and in this podcast, I am on one mission and one mission only, and that is going to help you awaken your truest and highest self, embrace and embody your true power, and help you elevate to a completely new consciousness, a transformational journey with the Walking Manifestator you are born to be. So with that being said, let's dive deep. Now, interestingly enough, a lot of people as humans, right, we tend to say, I know this, right? If I tell you, you should probably eat healthier foods, you're probably going to look at me and say, I know that. If you're working out with a trainer and let's say it's two alphas, for the most part, one of them will say, yeah, I know that, man. I know that, right? If it's a girl, and she's trying to give some tips to another girl that does makeup, for the most part, you will encounter situations where the other person will say, yeah, I know that. And this is the thing about I know that when we pretend that we know everything, you know nothing. And number two is by knowing something and implementing something, those are two completely different roads. And as I was out in that summit in Miami, by the way, it was beautiful. If you guys have not been to Miami, it is a beautiful place to visit. It's a Hispanic culture, a melting pot. I was able to network with new people. And in this summit, I had the opportunity to actually hear Neil Donald Walsch. And if you don't know who that is, he has an amazing book that I highly recommend called Conversations with God. Okay. And in this book, he basically goes on to talk about how he had a very hard situation happen to him. And as you probably know by now, I don't identify with the word hard. I rather use the word contrast, right? Because anything we're going through is simply that, it's contrast, because we do not know what good is if we don't experience the bad. So I don't want to ruin the story for you. I want you to go out and read that book, and I will give you a summary, which essentially talks about how he goes through this very hard situation full of contrast, right? And what happens to him, and I even caught myself as I say it to him because it happened for him and he says it himself, he got in a car accident, and he lost everything to the point where he became homeless. And as he is in this rock bottom situation, right, he essentially starts having conversations in his diary. And at one point, this innate awareness just comes over him as he's questioning God, and he's saying, like, why would you allow this to happen to me? Like, I had a job, I had a life, I had everything, and because of an accident now I've lost everything. So the story goes on to basically move forward and talk to him in a way where his innate intelligence, his connection with God speaks through him. And if you're probably listening to this part and you're about to hop off, just bear with me for a second, because if you think about it, in history, the people that were connected in a divine way, let's use Jesus as an example, when that was occurring, people doubted this person. And they would say you are essentially lying about these prophecies that you're talking about these messages that you have. And oftentimes as society, we need to lose this person in order for us to now put him on a pedestal and say, like, oh my God, that was one of the greatest. Oftentimes we have to wait for that person to pass away for us to now identify them as somebody that we could have learned from. That's something that I just want to share with you, because I know that if I would have heard this message even 5 years ago, I would have been like, this person is crazy. And when I was reading his book, one of the things that was really interesting was that he has this moment where he just starts writing and like just writing everything out. He can't stop because he's asking, the whole spill goes around. He had asked, why did you allow this to happen? And now his hand just completely is like, going off on this explanation. So again, I don't want to ruin it for you. And if you guys do want me to do an episode talking a little bit more about that book, I will gladly do that. But the point that I want to share with you is that he becomes, as those moments in his life that were the most impactful, full of the most contrast of his life, he believes in something higher than him. He believes in something that he could not explain. He believes in something that he could not understand. And oftentimes as humans, what we do not understand, we automatically regard as bad, as evil, as negative. But that's not the case. At one point, we didn't actually believe that electricity was something good, right? But yet here we are. So when this is happening, he ends up having a voice in his head that tells him, like, and again, this is God speaking to him, basically says, you know what? You need to turn this entire book that you've just crafted and take it to a publisher. And he's like, wait, like, this is a conversation that you and I have been having in private this entire time. Like, how can you ask me to share this? It's like, because this wasn't just a message for you, it was a message for the world. He goes on to become one of New York's best-selling authors. And he was at the summit. He was sharing at the summit. And I was just so amazed by the fact that we were able to hear. Unfortunately, he wasn't in person. And I say unfortunately because I know if any of you are listening to this and you were at the summit, you're probably going to say like, oh, he wasn't there. However, for me, it's a presence. For me, it's the energy. So for me, he was there. And it's funny because this is why I titled this episode, Practice What You Preach. The moment that things didn't go according to plan, and I honestly think it was like the universe's way of like proving to us, you have work to do. Because the moment that technology, right, wasn't going hand in hand with what we as a crowd were expecting, people were complaining because the internet was glitching. And there was these people behind me that start saying like, oh man, this is like BS. Like, he's not here. Like, I want a refund. And they're like saying it very subtly, but to the point where people can hear, right? And then this person's basically saying like, oh my God, this is so annoying. Like, it's cutting out. We can't hear him. And I'm sitting there and I met this like new like friend there that he's like saying next to me, right? Like, oh, it's a shame that it's not working. And I was like, it's happening for a reason. And there's a lesson to be learned here. And the whole thing, because I was able to catch some of the things that he had said before it started cutting out. I was like, what he's going to share with us is that, you're not your thoughts. You're the consciousness above your thoughts. And he just looks at me like he wasn't expecting me to have like an answer to that. And I was like, sometimes we just have to practice being in the moment, right? Sometimes things don't happen the way we want them to, but that doesn't mean we should lose our patience. And he was like, oh my, like, I didn't see it that way, right? Like, no, like, thank you for sharing. And I know the people behind me heard because I said it to, him pretty loudly. So obviously the people behind me heard. And I thought that was such an interesting moment because this is what happens on a day-to-day. You can sit here and listen to podcasts like you're doing right now, or watching this on YouTube, or going to a retreat, or going to cleanse your chakras, or whatever it is that you're working on, okay? But here's the thing. If you are not practicing what you're preaching about, which is meditation, which is awareness, which is being in a state of coherency, which is just trying to develop yourself maybe, right? Getting a better understanding of who you identify to be. However, you allow external circumstances to dictate how you react, dictate how you feel, and you give people your energy. then are you really doing the thing that you're there to do? It was funny because there was a moment where Reagan Hillier got off of stage and they were like, okay, the quick break, guys. And all the people, all the girls were like walking super fast to the bathroom to the point where like they would kind of like, I don't want to say push each other, but to the point where, like you're racing to the bathroom and you kind of get in front of somebody, but you know that somebody was behind you. And somebody did that to me and I just kind of like, laughed. I didn't laugh like loudly, but I did like my smile. And I was like, wow, like we just finished this beautiful meditation and we're now racing to the bathroom versus like, oh, go for it. Like no worries. Like we're going to get there. And you can argue the fact that maybe she really had to use a restroom. I get it. But that's my point. We don't know what other people are going through, but we do know how we can react to those situations. And more times than not, we're so quick to judge a situation based off what we perceive. And if you listen to one of the first episodes we ever had in this podcast, it was geared around your paradigm. Your paradigm is a series of events that have almost exclusive control over your habitual behavior. So things that have happened in your life that have now dictated the way that you are, the way that you react, the way that you perceive things. And sometimes people might not mean what you believe they mean, but because of how you were raised, you assume that is what they're thinking. But that's not the case. And when I was reflecting in that moment, I was like, wow, like we have a lot of work to do as society, as humanity, as we are embarking in this growth journey. And what's interesting is that if you're listening to this right now, and if you're in this personal development or anything that I'm sharing with you resonates, number one, there's a reason for that, okay? Because the things that you're listening to right now, like there's going to be things that, how you just kind of have like a filter, like that's not my color, I'm not going to wear it. And then there's other things that you just automatically resonate with. I believe that's the same thing when it comes to messages that come through. And they come from your innate intelligence. They come from your awareness. They come from your higher self. And there's certain things that you're going to like relate to. And there's other things that you're just going to completely disregard. And you're like, yeah, no, that does not in any way, shape, or form identify with who I am or what I want to identify as. And I think that when we're in this journey, we're often labeled as people that, maybe we believe that we don't, get mad and that we're like better than others, or maybe you believe that everything is going to be perfect because now you're working on yourself. But it's actually the opposite. When you're going through this process of evolution, process of self-awareness, of development, you're going to experience turbulence. You're going to experience situations where you're going to be tested. And I know one of my mentors doesn't like to use the word tested because they're like, well, that implies that there's a right or a wrong answer. I do believe that some tests are good in life because they allow you to see and measure whether you grew from that experience or not. Now, we can sit here and say like, well, I don't believe that a test should, because I know some, again, people that are in this industry of self-development, they'll say like, don't label something as like a test, or don't give it a meaning. And that's okay if that's what they identify with. But for me, for context, I do believe that there's certain situations in life that we're going to go through in order for us to learn a situation, an experience, something from it, something of substance. And if you can really understand that it's okay for you to go through some contrast in your self-development, that means that you're growing. That means that there's an opportunity for you to evolve. Behind every moment of contrast, there is literally a wall right behind it, just waiting for you to burst through it and get to the other side. When I would drive, I remember I was like a road rage driver. And again, I'm not sitting here and say like I'm kumbaya and I never speed. I know that there's moments where like, if it's like a 70, highway type thing, I'm not trying to put myself here in on a video agreeing that I'm like going 75 and things of that nature, wink, wink. But as that happens, right, you can catch yourself and be like, why am I rushing? I'm going to get there when I get there. And everything is happening in the most beautiful way. I got there to the event. I went with one of my friends. She's an attorney. She's also getting into she's an amazing human being, and she's also growing her brand for personal development. She's going to be coaching more attorneys, people in the corporate world. And when we went to that event, it was funny because I wanted to get there at a specific time. I'm somebody that likes to be on time. Like, my family's military background, and even though I didn't really grow up with my military family, as you guys probably know by now, I've shared with you, I grew up with my grandparents, but I know that I've always heard the saying, like, if you are on time, you are late. And when people are late, it really irritates me. There's a little, hidden anchor there. I just don't really like it. And my friend, she's more laid back. And again, you can learn from people. You can always learn. There's something to learn in every situation. So we are checking out to go to the event, right? It's the second day. It's going to be the last day. I already have the Uber waiting for us. I'm in the car and she's still not downstairs. So my ego's already like, oh my gosh, like, she's still not here. Like, we're going to be late. And then I caught myself and I was like, you know what? It's fine. Like, we're going to get there at the time that we're supposed to get there and everything is okay. Well, you see, I got there, quote unquote, late, which wasn't really late because they had just started to like sit down and stuff. So it was actually perfect timing. But I ended up meeting some amazing people where I sat down. And that all happened through the synchronicities of just releasing and letting go and saying, you know what, I'm going to sit down next to the person that I'm meant to sit down, and I'm going to absorb the information that I'm supposed to absorb. And I'm going to be in the right place at the right moment at the right time, versus focusing on all the negativity. And if you followed any of the last episodes, you know that we are energy. So when you are focusing on all the negative things of your life, if you're focusing on all the negative things that can happen, you are a magnifier for that. You are literally putting energy into something that you don't want to happen, which is the reason why when you're manifesting, you should never say, I don't feel pain, for instance, right? Or I never experience lack. No, you focus on what you want. I am so thankful for all the abundance. I am so thankful for all the health. I am so thankful for all the blessings. You focus on what you want versus what you don't want, because even though you're saying, I don't want this, the universe is not going to say, oh, they're saying they don't want to be broke, therefore they want to be rich. Let me give them richness. No, they're like, oh, they don't want to be broke. They're in a lack mentality. Therefore, let's keep giving them more of what they have, what they are embedded in their mind to receive. So I want to share with you 6 questions that you should really start asking yourself that are going to help you really in your embodiment. And if you don't know what embodiment means, basically it's acting in the assumption of that being done. Okay, so I know for me, breaking free from a lot of my limiting beliefs in terms of like my money blocks was definitely a huge stepping stone. You have to remember, like, I was growing with my grandma in a storage room. I, struggled with situations that, her and I went through, and my grandfather, I would wear the same jeans over and over again. So going from like literally a mindset of like not really having to now, when I first got my first real estate check, I was like, oh my gosh, you can make this much money in one transaction. Like, this is what my grandparents have been working for like 4 months for. And I share this because it's okay for you to have blocks around certain things in your life. What I would encourage you to do is recognize them so you can start breaking free from them, because nobody's going to come here and save you in terms of saying, okay, you need to start believing in this and this and this and this, because even if they did that, it wouldn't identify with you because you haven't done the work. You haven't identified those blocks. This is the reason why psychiatrists are so known and so sought after, and people pay years and years and years of, therapy, because they want to be able to communicate with somebody that as years pass by, if you are lucky enough and you lead to the golden pot, you will identify the block. And that's why for me, I love personal development, because personal development tells you the tools that you need to do in order for you to grow and evolve and stop identifying with those blocks. And if you can recognize them, you're on your way to setting yourself free. And maybe you just can't recognize them right now. Then I'm telling you, seek for a personal development coach. This is the reason why I'm so passionate about what I'm doing now in my new Walking Manifestator coaching, because I see how much people need more of this in the world, need more personal development. I can sit here and give you all the free value, and I hope that you can, get anything that's relevant to you for you to go and execute. I want that for you. But I know that there's people out there that no matter how much they listen to something, they still need that extra push, right? They still, like me, when I first started in real estate, I needed somebody to believe in me. I didn't have that. I had to look for it. I had to go and look for it in books. I had to go and at one point pay a coach. And it was sacrifices, right? I remember my first coach, I was paying $2,000 a month. I was like, oh my gosh, I've 10x my return, my investment. So this is something that I share with you because if you can start becoming very aware of these conversations that you're having with yourself, and you can become aware of how you're reacting to situations after you've taken the time to work on whatever you were doing that day. Let's say you read 10 pages of a meditation book, and then you go out in the real world and you're around a person that's testing you. That's the time where you want to see if what you're actually reading, you can implement, what you're practicing, that you are constantly trying to learn from, that it's not just what you're preaching, but you're actually walking the walk. Practice what you're preaching about. So the first question I would encourage you to ask yourself is, what is your minimum standard? You see, this is an interesting question because a lot of the times you don't realize that you have a set standard. You might be asking yourself, like, it's because I always attract the same men, or if you're a guy and you're listening to this, I always attract the same girls. Or maybe you're saying, you know what? It's because I just can't find love because there's nothing real like that. And nowadays people are so fake and X, Y, and Z. Guess what? You just attracted that into your life because that's your belief. That's your thermostat. That's your standard. It's like a little Nest thermostat, right? If you put 75 degrees, it is not going to change past the 75 degrees because that's the thermostat level that you have. That's the limit. Unless you change it, then it's not going to move. It's the same thing when it comes to your mindset. If you're not moving that needle, it's going to stay there. And I lived through this because this was something that for me, when it came to people in my life that I had allowed in my life, it was because that's what I believe was good for me based off my standard, based off my thermostat. And when I started like really going deep down into the whole self-development journey, manifestation journey, transformation journey, I started realizing how I was the one that needed to change. I couldn't change anybody else, but if I could change me, I could start vibrating at a different energy, at a different frequency, therefore attract more people that were in harmony with that new vibration of me. Ask yourself, what is my minimum standard? What am I not willing to accept anymore? What am I willing to have in my life, and what am I not willing to have in my life? Number 2 is, what are you willing to tolerate? And that goes hand in hand with your standard, but standard is something that like, I will never be willing to accept anything below this. And your standard is just, that's your baseline, right? What you tolerate can be very different from that because maybe you're in a situation where you're working at a certain job and now your new standard is that you want to get out of that job. Therefore, your new standard is going to be, I'm going to start working toward, launching my new clothing brand as an example. But you know that you're willing to tolerate for maybe the next few weeks until you are able to get your new clothing brand started so that you can go and take that next step. And this is where the manifestation really comes into play because I'm telling you, you need to start acting in the assumption of it already being done. And I know it can be sometimes a little, it can show some contrast for some people because you're like, how do you want me to act like if that's already done, if it's not done? It's like, because you have to start working on what you're appreciative of. This is why I also made sure that in our new community, for those of you that are not aware, we started a new community. It's called the Walking Manifestator, but it's going to be a community where we're going to share just insights. We have some coaching programs that are completely included within the community. We have just worksheets, things that are going to help you really start embodying this because this is a muscle. This is a muscle that you need to start really practicing. And the reason I share this with you is because sometimes people don't believe in themselves. Therefore, what you believe is what's going to be so. what you perceive is what you will receive. So being around people that believe in you is going to allow you to attract more of that into your life, because now you're around people that are going to be rooting for you. Number 3 is, what is stopping me from growing? Answer yourself that question. Number 4, what are my limits? Number 5, what is blocking me? And number 6, what have I not been willing to see that is blocking me? And that last one is very important, because this is where having the right mentor in your life is going to help you, because sometimes we don't see our own blind spots. I knew I was burning a lot of really potential relationships, friendships, partnerships, and I was not willing to see it. So if I can leave you with anything today, is to start being more aware and practice what you preach, because it's amazing that you're showing up today and watching this video. And if you're at this point in the video or the podcast, that's amazing. You're doing something that somebody else might not even see as important. But that is one part of the equation. The other part of the equation is starting to work on that muscle. Your muscle's not going to grow. If you go to the gym 1 time, 2 times a week, that's not going to be enough. You need to continuously go in order for you to build that muscle that later you're going to be able to use wherever, right? You're going to be able to wear that tank top. You're going to be able to rock those nice shorts, show that 6-pack, because you've worked hard every single day. And sometimes people don't see what's going on behind the curtain. They only see, oh yeah, they think they're all that because they look good. Don't worry about what other people's opinions of you are. Worry about how you're showing up for yourself. Worry about practicing what you're preaching. So with that being said, that is my message for you today. If there is anything in this podcast or video, depending on where you're watching this, that resonates with you, please leave your aha moment on the comments. I really want to grow this into a community where we all learn from each other. I don't just want to be the only one talking here. I want you guys to give feedback. And for those of you that already have, I appreciate you so much. Whenever you guys have tagged me that you're listening to the podcast, I've seen your photos, you driving and you put the podcast, or some of you guys that have sent emails. Honestly, guys, that means the world to me. It really does. And this is why I do this. I do this because I truly believe that I have a mission here to share my story in order for you to discover your story and how powerful you truly are. There's a reason why everything has happened the way that it has. So I hope you have a fantastic day. Thank you once again for tuning in and supporting. And I send you many blessings. I will talk to you guys soon. Thank you so much for watching yet another episode of Walking Manifestator. And with that being said, I want to remind you, visualize, embody, and transcend. Be the walking manifestator you are born to be.